Whenever we have market essays, they follow a trend where the question would either be, what is the best government intervention? Or like a certain market figure, and they'll tell you which one. It could be negative externalities, positive externalities, or something else. And the other question could be, should governments intervene? So we have to approach both of them differently.
Okay.
I'll give you some examples really quickly so that you have context of how to apply the knowledge. For example, this question said, is imposing a tax the best government intervention to solve unhealthy food and drink? So it would be like this scenario. So you'd be talking about an indirect tax, and you'd be talking,
Yeah.
for example, subsidizing like healthier food, or you could talk about regulation or provision of information. So it's like
Yeah.
this category. But another example could be um, like I need to see the extract, but this one it says evaluate whether governments should allow markets to respond freely to these challenges, or in other words, if they should intervene. Or this
Yeah.
one, should the government increase, should the governments intervene in the sand market, or is it best solved by market forces? So these are examples of the second scenario.
Okay.
Let's start with scenario one. The question could be something like, what is the best government intervention for, let's just say, gambling or vaping or any kind of demerit good, okay? Or let's just say a demerit good in general.
Yeah.
What would you do in your introduction? Or do you want me to just talk and go through it and revise from that?
Uh, so for the introduction, I would define the what do mean like the keywords. So in this
Yep,
case, government intervention.
cool. I would always start by identifying the market failure. So, for example, I just say something like vaping is vapes are a demerit good.
Yeah.
Let's define that. So, demerit goods are good.
Which are goods that cause negative externalities.
Good. Exactly. Goods that have negative externalities in consumption.
Yeah.
If you want to define that, you can, or we can do that in our answer.
Yeah.
So these are negative impacts from a third party. This is an example of market failure,
Yeah.
and when governments might need to intervene. So that's it. There's not really a definition for government intervention. So you would just define market failure and say market failure is a reason for government intervention to happen.
Okay. Cool.
Cool. That's the introduction. That introduction itself is fine. You don't have to go over the top with it. So then you just have to pick two or three, depending on how fast you write and how detailed you want to write.
Yeah.
Ideally, two in a really good amount of detail, and if you have time, three, but definitely not more than that, or less than that, with because you want to make sure you're in detail with two or three, which you're comparing as well.
Yeah. Okay. With regards to that, my teacher said I should aim for three. But I usually I find it easier to just go for two and do detailed. I don't know which
Um,
one.
My
Like,
personal preference is two as well, but a lot of teachers do say three, so it's good to be ambitious and aim for three. But in the real exam, there's a lot of pressure and it's difficult to write fast. So if you do two in a lot of detail, and in your evaluations you can touch on other methods like behavioral economics and so on, then I think it should be okay.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
but say you do really well, smash the rest of the paper, and you have like 40 minutes for the 25 marker, then you might you can aim for three. There's no
Okay.
right
Yeah.
to do that. But yeah, don't be scared to just do two in a lot of detail. Like it's not the end of the world. You can get top marks just for doing two.
Yeah. Okay.
But for the purpose of this, let's pick three or four methods and make sure we know how to talk about them. So what would be your main government interventions for a demerit good?
Uh, so taxation.
Yep. Taxation. What?
Um, I mean indirect tax.
Perfect.
Uh, yeah. Um, I mean you could. like alternatives, you can try and like subs no, not subsidize, but like kind try and incentivize like people to buy alternatives which are less like harmful.
Yeah, you could
Uh,
subsidize healthier alternatives, or you could use provision of information,
yeah, like information campaigns
or you
to
could use behavioral economics.
yeah,
Um,
banning shows,
Regulation
nudges.
is a good one, just completely banning them, which
Yeah.
is what happened this year. The Rishi Sunak banned vapes, and he also banned the sale of cigarettes for anybody born in 2010. They can never buy cigarettes.
Or has he already done it?
Yeah, so people who are already 18 can still buy cigarettes, but people who are born in 2010, who are currently 14, when they turn 18, they won't be allowed to buy cigarettes.
Oh, okay. Are vapes banned?
Uh, I think he set a date for them to be banned. So for the cigarettes, you can use this example and say that a 14-year-old today, basically someone born in 2010, will never be able to buy a cigarette. Um, and then with regard to vape, they're banned from
Anyone born after
2025.
2010?
Yeah, so
Okay,
cigarettes,
so
anyone after 2010, yeah.
anyone after born after 2010 can't be
Basically,
given.
he's effectively tried to ban it now, but you can't just do it in straight away. It takes a lot of like time and logistics. So they've done it for anyone born in 2010. So there's 4 years of kind of marination, basically.
Yeah, okay.
And then with regard to vape, it's from you shops won't be able to sell it from 2025.
Uh, yeah, April 2025 for banning vapes.
Yeah. Um, okay. But don't worry about the dates. Like if you forget it, just say that he's already done implemented it for some years in the near future. It's not the end of the world if you forget the year.
Okay, but should I include that under the behavior? I mean, like the banning regulation one.
Yeah, 100%. If you're going to talk about regulation and you can remember that example, then you can just say that one example is, well, when you're talking about indirect tax, you can say
Yeah,
that in the past 10, 20, 30 years, cigarettes have been heavily taxed with big indirect taxes, but people have still been heavy smokers. So clearly it's not been working. So
yeah,
other alternative could be regulation. And when you're talking about regulation, you can mention that one example, which we're yet to see the impact of, is the ban of vapes from next year onwards.
yeah.
So it's just useful to know those examples. Um, Further, yeah, it's just useful to know those examples.
Okay, cool.
Cool. One last one is a maximum price. I wouldn't really, sorry, a minimum price. I wouldn't personally do a minimum price because it's quite basic and uh,
Yeah,
I mean, but there's actually no harm in picking a basic intervention because you
yeah,
still have a diagram and you still have a lot to write about. The key thing is just you're able to show your knowledge. So
yeah.
there's just
So
one, yeah.
which ones would you go for? Like, if you're trying to show.
Sometimes the question says, what is the best government intervention? Sometimes the question mentions something like, is an indirect tax the best way to solve the problem? Or is regulation
Yeah,
a solution? So in that scenario, you have to do the one it says.
yeah,
Therefore, let's practice all of them. And then in the exam, if the question says what is what is the best one, you genuinely just pick the two or three that you find the fastest and easiest to write. There's no right or wrong answer.
yeah. Okay, that's
I
good.
would definitely talk about indirect tax. It's just the easy one and probably one of the most common government interventions in the UK. So I wouldn't miss that. But as your second or third one, you could pick any of these. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, okay.
So let's make sure we smash indirect tax. So one example of an indirect tax is wait, sorry, why am I saying an example? The definition of an indirect tax. An indirect tax is a cost of production that causes supply to shift to the left. Yeah. Is that how you'd also define it or something similar?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Cool. I would basically jump straight to the diagram at this stage. So I've just grabbed the diagram and I would just draw that in my essay. And it's literally just demand, supply, and supply
yeah,
shift to the left. Go to S2 and go and grab that rectangle and just explain that what all of this shows. Don't forget your very basic point. So first thing is that after the tax, supply shifts from S1 to S2
Yeah,
and price increases from Q1, P1 to P2 and quantity falls from Q1 to Q2. Uh, this could mean that the overconsumption of vapes would have reduced since the equilibrium quantity has also reduced.
yeah,
And you can just relate it to the fact that, like, just reiterate why the overconsumption and how people didn't consider that there are bad health effects which can impact the NHS and the third party and the taxpayer, or the litter of vapes is another big one, or being distracted at school because kids are vaping and so on.
yeah. Okay.
And but the key thing with some of the policies, such as an indirect tax and such as a minimum price, is that there's more evaluation than good points about it. So, what's
Yeah,
a good way to evaluate a tax diagram or a tax?
yeah. So for tax, if they were to tax vape, sorry, that means that there might be a opening up the like black markets could happen. They could open up black markets and people could be selling them legally, which is even worse.
Yeah. Um, that's the same with minimum price as well. So, one of the things, or regulation as well. So, that's actually with all three of them.
Yeah,
If you tax or minimum price a vape, then people could sell them for cash in hand at a
yeah,
lower price. So the government can still implement the policy, but they have to ensure that they're maybe suppose the tax is worth a certain amount of money, they should be
yeah,
allocated some of that money to enforcement.
yeah,
But that could also be quite expensive.
yeah.
Uh,
And
one more.
uh, um, I, could you talk about how it would? I mean, it requires a time. There will be a time like if for when you're using like taxations for to it would
Uh,
take a long.
one
But
We could talk about a time lag for many of these. For example, we talked about how banning vapes is from next year and banning cigarettes is in from 4 years' time. But one that I'd really like to use if we're talking about an indirect tax is the good will be very inelastic. And I
yeah,
try to draw this diagram and explain that the demerit good,
yeah,
obviously talk about the one in question because it might not always, but 99% it is inelastic.
yeah,
So just say have an inelastic demand curve. And just explain what that means. So just show that demand inelastic means that when the price goes up, quantity doesn't change too much. And just
yeah.
explain the reasons why. So why are vapes inelastic?
Because I mean the people are just addicted, or there's little substitutes,
Yeah.
so they're willing to pay the
There's
price.
actually three reasons. So vapes may be inelastic because they could be addictive. Also, one thing, always use words like maybe, can be, because it's not guaranteed. But yeah, maybe inelastic because they could be addictive
Yeah,
and have little or few substitutes. In this case, vapes and cigarettes and stuff, there are substitutes for each other and other stuff, but you can still say that there are few substitutes. But
yeah,
one good thing, especially for example, in the 2017 paper, it was talking about sugary drinks. Sugary drinks aren't necessarily they're a bit addictive, but the main reason that they're inelastic is because they cost a low proportion of income, or in other words, they're cheap. Basically, the reason that's important and a good point that other people might not say is because suppose say sugary drinks go up from £1 to £1.20, that's a 20% tax, but £1 to £1.20 is a low proportion of income. So if you're buying a sugary drink once a day or once a week, it's not that much, it's 20p difference.
yeah,
Whereas if something's expensive and it goes from 20%, £100 to £120, that's going to affect you quite a lot. So that's
Yeah.
another thing.
So
And
low proportion of income.
durable, they're quite durable as well, as in they, I don't know how long they last, but they may last a certain amount of time, which might mean people are not worried about the price change. So therefore, taxing vapes might be an ineffective policy.
Yeah.
And you just want to like I talked about how you could use 2 or 5 diagrams. It doesn't really matter, but here's an easy example to just show off because it's such an easy diagram, and you literally just have to draw it again. And you can
So
do, sorry,
is this diagram to show that it's
yeah,
inelastic?
I would literally write a comment and just say, for example, the diagram shows an indirect tax,
Yeah.
but the difference is that it shows the impact
Yeah.
if demand is inelastic.
Yeah.
I would just describe that Q1 falls to Q2, and that's a very, very tiny change. Whereas price increases all the way from P1 to P2. So the main impact, quantity barely falls. Therefore, the market failure is not resolved because the market failure was about the overconsumption.
Yeah.
And overconsumption is still happening. Um, and then we can talk about how what was it? We can talk about the burden as well. So also the red part of the rectangle shows that consumer burden is very much higher compared to before, compared to if the tax, if the good wasn't inelastic.
Yeah.
Like here it was just like half and half. These are all the bad things, and you can talk about how this is regressive as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Affects people with lower incomes.
more like for example, it's okay, vaping is bad for everyone, but why isn't it unfair that somebody who's broke now can't buy vapes or use all their money to buy vapes, but somebody who's rich, it won't impact them? Another bad thing about that is that you can almost argue the opposite. It's unfair and it's not going to do anything for the richer people.
Yeah.
It's going to stop.
It's not going to affect so they're a bit less likely to stop vaping.
Exactly, exactly. But there needs to be enough of a scary like feeling or an incentive for them to stop, which
Yeah.
is wonderful. But yeah, what's one good thing about taxing an inelastic product?
Um, I mean, you get tax revenue, and you can use
Way
that
more
tax revenue.
revenue. Way more tax revenue. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you can evaluate your evaluation, can't you, to make a top answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know all this stuff, way more tax revenue, and then that could be redistributed in different ways. For example, subsidize healthy alternatives, and you can just touch on what a subsidy is very briefly, and then move on to the next policy.
Yeah. So would that just all come under indirect tax?
Yeah, I would. I would just do a short or medium explanation of what a indirect tax is, describe the
Yeah.
diagram, and then a massive evaluation. Obviously,
Okay.
there's no right and wrong way. As long as you just have to have good knowledge, good analysis, and very good evaluation. But in this case, there was a lot of there was
Valid.
everything going on, but that's completely fine because there's a logic to what I'm writing.
Yeah.
Cool. That should be nice and simple once you just revise indirect tax, and you already knew all the key points anyway. So let's
Yeah.
go to the harder ones. You just have to be, because I think most people would do indirect tax, so you just have to have a very good second paragraph.
So we focus on the regulation. I mean, sorry, evaluation for it because that's where the main points are, and I can use like the way more tax revenue and stuff like that, and subsidizing. Is that where the like I should focus on like my writing?
Especially like the inelastic side of it
Yeah.
as
Okay.
well. But yeah, weaknesses and strengths, both of them. Like for example, the strength is the tax revenue, uh, because it separates your answer from somebody who's just going to do a tax.
Yeah.
But don't forget the basics, like just saying that Q1 goes to Q2, and then in this case, which in theory it solves the market failure, and here
Yeah.
Q1 and Q2 is not is a small gap, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And keep going back to the question. So in your conclusion, you could say something in your like not a conclusion, in a mini conclusion. So
Yeah, yeah,
I call it a mini conclusion. You could say so an indirect tax may not be an ideal policy if we think that vapes are inelastic.
yeah,
And then you could start your next paragraph by saying a better or a different option might be. I forgot one thing for this paragraph. I wanted to say that um, these are examples
yeah.
of government failure. Okay, because it's not going to stop people
Uh,
from like
Would I?
all of these, right?
Yeah. Should I define government failure, or should I just like write it?
Yeah, again, it depends how much of a rush you are. If you're sitting at home writing a perfect answer, you would write a line saying government failure is when the government intervention fails to resolve the market failure. But like
Yeah,
I mentioned, it's difficult on time. I completely get that. So as long as you're writing basically the way I see an essay,
yeah.
as you had a friend who doesn't do economics and they were able to read your essay and understand it, that's a good essay.
Okay. Yeah.
So
So I should be like speaking to the
yeah,
examiners though they don't know what's going on.
basically, yeah. To some extent, like you don't have to dumb it too much, but as much as you can, keep it as simple as possible. No need to use any massive big words or anything like that. Short sentences just flow nicely and easy to read.
Yeah.
Like obviously diagrams don't know what's going on. So just when you're in your general writing, just write in a way that anyone can understand.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. I want to focus on provision of information, because it's one that people generally find hard to explain. When I'm doing provision of information, so the first thing I would do is I'd start with this. So I'd say this is the current market failure with vaping. It is a negative externality in consumption. This is the issue here is that the buyer and seller are not considering the impact on the third party. Therefore, there is an overconsumption because we are currently at Q1, but we wish to be at QS.
Yeah.
If you use this, it makes it easier to explain what providing information is.
Okay.
Um, do you know
Would
how to draw the diagram, or do you want help with it?
um I get confused with like I mean sometimes I just like mess up the MSB and the MPV
Yeah.
with the other ones sometimes.
Okay. I made a video with it from another lesson of how to draw the externality diagram. So do you want me to go through it with you now, or should I just send you the video after?
Yeah, I should be able to send it after. It should be fine.
Okay, fine.
Thanks.
Um, in that case, assuming you know how to do this, I would just draw this and explain that there's an overconsumption.
Uh, okay. Would you start off with the diagram or like after put the
Not the
diagram?
sentence first. I'll just say sorry, I've got a bit lost. So I would just say a different option would be to provide information. The diagram below shows the current market value that exists before information is provided. And then I could just talk about what providing information entails. But there's no right or wrong. You could do the diagram a bit later on.
Yeah, okay. I
Um,
think if I put the
because-
diagram,
sorry,
um, I don't in my opinion, like writing the diagram first, it helps because then I just know what I'm talking about. Like,
exactly. The reason I like to use the diagram is because providing information itself doesn't have a concrete diagram like how a tax does. So if there's no diagram, I prefer to use this and say that I'm trying to go from Q1 to QS by providing information.
uh, also got another question. What is
Yeah.
that? Does that say Q? The first Q. What
This
does it
is a
say?
Q1,
Yeah.
and then this can be written as anything you like. You can write Q2, or you can write Q star, or you can write QS. The
Okay.
main thing is that when you're describing it, you should say that Q1
Yeah.
is a free market equilibrium, which is determined always by when MPC equals MPB. QS or Q2 or Q star is the social optimum where we wish to be at if everybody considered third parties as well, or if third parties were not ignored. And this is always found at the point where MSB equals MPC, sorry, MSC, social equals social, and the market is private equals private. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and do I have to include that if third parties were ignored?
You don't have to include any particular sentence that I'm writing. Uh, there's no right and wrong way to explain stuff.
Okay.
It just helps, like, I mean, it's just for your understanding, really.
Yeah, okay.
Again, remember, if I'm talking to somebody who doesn't do economics, they're more likely to
Yeah.
understand it if I explain it this way.
Yeah.
And the examiner is not going to be giving away free marks, like assuming you know everything. So the more you describe, the more pleased the examiner is going to be because other students are not doing that.
Yeah. Uh, we know that this is the current market failure with vaping. Do I write that part before the diagram or after?
I'm a bit lost in terms of my structure, but yeah, I would have done it before the diagram.
Okay, so I say different option is information provision, and then
Uh,
say
yeah, a different option is provision of information. Currently, this is the market failure, which is related to an overconsumption.
okay, and then draw the diagram and then explain the diagram.
Exactly. And now we can move on to actually what provision of information is. So what is provision of information, or what kind of forms could that take?
Yeah, so you could do like information campaigns or like posters and like advertising.
Good. A good example of it is during COVID. There was free provision of vaccinations, but there was also so much provision of information, like it was crazy. People, you might not realize, um, every single time you go on the TV or on the radio or anywhere, would say something like the importance of a vaccine or be safe or stay at home or wear a mask and so on and so on.
Yeah,
It's all provision of information. So you can relate it to that depending on the question as well.
yeah,
Um, and in terms of actually solving the market failure, you would explain that this is kind of a natural way for people to consider the impact of their transactions on third parties or like even their future self. So if they don't consider their future self could be a third party, or their family, or their future kids, or their neighbors, or the taxpayer, whoever it is. So,
okay,
and you relate it to how, for example, with vaping, somebody doesn't think like a kid who's vaping doesn't think about how it's gonna impact their health in the long term, or how it's gonna impact their parents, or how it's gonna impact uh how when they go to the doctor and the taxpayer has to pay for it. So just relate it to that and just use those examples. And if
yeah.
how would you do what would happen to the diagram now that this has happened, the campaigns have happened?
Um, so the marginal social benefit would shift outwards. I mean, shift.
So
I mean, the cost will be less because the people are
oh,
looking at that
so
information and
yeah. So the demand curve would shift to the left, basically.
the right or the
The
okay,
MPB is basically your demand curve, isn't it?
yeah,
So you don't necessarily need to touch this diagram. It's a very complicated and high level diagram already. You don't
yeah,
need to do anything to it. You could either do another diagram and do a
okay.
demand shifting left diagram because that would take you what, 10 seconds?
Demand shifting, yeah, yeah,
It
like a
takes something
just a
so
basic
simple.
one.
Yeah, something so simple. And this isn't necessary. You don't have to do this. Okay. Or in words, you can talk about MPB, which matches the demand curve. MPB is basically the demand curve, isn't it?
Yeah,
What is MSB? If MPB is the demand curve, what is MSB?
MSP, uh, maybe the. I mean, wouldn't the other one be the supply, not MSP? MSP would be the I don't know, second like the second D1 or like
So MSB is what the demand curve should be if everyone considered externalities. This isn't
So is
something
that the
right. This is just for your understanding.
okay?
This is just for your understanding, yeah.
Yeah.
Or you could say that MSB is your ideal, your social, your where we want demand curve to be.
Okay. Is that the same applies to the for the social? I mean, for
Yeah,
the
again,
PPC?
MPC is your supply curve.
Yeah.
MSC, what your supply curve should be if everyone
Yes.
considered externalities.
Okay.
Yeah,
Also
that's how
another thing.
you think about it. Yeah,
For the diagram,
yeah.
uh, what do we not include the P price like or
Sorry,
like
repeat.
would you not
Oh,
include price or like the P1
uh,
on P?
yeah, this is a weird one. I've been confused about that myself, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
I would do P1 as here.
Yeah.
However, I would not necessarily do P2 here or P star or PS here because that implies that PS is lower. And I believe that's not how it should work or how I don't know if that should matter.
Yeah.
The key thing is that you feel free to put P1
Yeah.
or maybe ask your teacher at school as well if they're helpful, maybe, and you could let me know as well. But um, you don't need to put P2 or PS. The point is not for the government to reduce the price to here necessarily. That's not the aim. The aim is just to reduce quantity to QS. As long as we get here, it doesn't matter if price has gone up or down.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely put P1. Just leave the P2 out of it. Just say that we're aiming to get to QS no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Really good understanding so far. And then
Uh,
just talk about how demand will shift to the left because now people will be frightened that their health is like being impacted and they're realizing that all the things that they didn't realize before, all the externalities that were being ignored, use the word ignored because that's what externalities are. In economics, externalities are costs or benefits to a third party that are ignored.
um,
Wait,
you know,
the meeting's about to end. You might just have to rejoin. Yeah, so just talk about externalities being ignored and now they're no longer ignored. So demand curve is shifting down because of the new advertising that people are able to understand the consequences of their consumption of a demerit good. And therefore, we're naturally going to go to a lower quantity, which is much closer or actually hopefully at Q star, the social
yeah.
optimum quantity.
Okay.
Um, just really quickly, regulation is a difficult paragraph to do in as a whole. Oh, wait, sorry. Before I jump to that, let me just evaluate this one. The evaluations of provision of information are simply that. What would you say before I tell you some of them?
Um, provision of I mean, some people just might not like listen to it. Like they might just
Absolutely no guarantee that it will get into people's heads. It could easily be ignored.
uh, isn't there like the side where people might like see it as unethical like isn't there like the people could think it's unethical that they're like trying to manipulate like influence you like isn't that something
Yeah,
I'm not
100%.
sure.
Everybody should make their own decisions. Everyone has their own life choices. So why are you providing information in order to tell people what to do? And everybody pays their fair share of tax, so they should be able to consume things that they enjoy.
Yeah.
One more really important one, even more important than these, are the very, very, very massive opportunity costs. It sounds like you're just telling people what to do, but really you're sending out leaflets. You're buying. Imagine you're calling up Spotify and you're asking Spotify, "Can I put a ad about the government about vapes from the government?" Like that's going to be so expensive.
Yeah.
It's not like
Huge opportunity.
yeah. There's so much crazy opportunity cost, and all that opportunity cost could have been used on something else, like literally just
Healthcare or something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But you could also flip it, and remember, we could also do good evaluations. So one evaluation could be that the money could have been raised from the taxation. So we're doing a tax and provision of information, like the tax that we did. We could
Yeah.
maybe do a tax, use that money to also provide information.
Oh,
Because a tax could be seen as a short-term policy, and then providing information is more of a long-term policy. So this is a
Yeah.
long solution to the problem. Education is a really good way for people to understand externalities, both positive and negative. So people should consume, everybody should have a gym membership because a gym membership is good for you. So that's educating children and people on that is a long-term solution rather than just taxing and subsidizing, which you can't do forever and ever. Look at the example with cigarettes. They taxed it for so many years and they've given up now.
Yeah. Okay.
And there was one other thing that was on my mind as well, but I've forgotten. Oh, one other thing is that there are many, many ways this can happen. You can also link it to behavioral economics. So it might not be necessarily um, traditional providing information through leaflets and through the letterbox and so on. You might just have behavioral economics, which is encouraging just like slyly encouraging different behavior. And this is the modern way of working. For example, have vapes behind the till, just like we have lottery tickets behind the till. If it's a gambling question, you can talk about how lottery tickets are not found on the shop floor, they're found behind the till. Or a lot of 14 and 15-year-olds like to drink energy drinks and Red Bull. So now they're putting Red Bull in certain places in the shop that it's not easy for anybody to take. And they're really cracking down on ID. And just the fact that you have to show your ID even though you're 16, it's just going to disincentivize people to buy it because they can't be bothered.
Yeah.
So you can
Um.
mention that anywhere in your essay at any point.
Okay.
Yeah,
Would
you
apart from
you asked about, sorry.
sorry, what were you gonna say?
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say, apart from these two, what would the third like point that I should talk about, or like because I've heard, Econ Plus. I saw this like hot topics video, which is most
Mm.
likely to come out, and he said behavioral economics, behavioral policies is quite going to be quite a big thing, apparently, or like he thinks it might be, but
I saw that too. From my experience, behavioral economics has been touching on questions for a long time, but not has not been a main question by itself. So it could be, but I believe the way he sounded as well, it sounded like it will be part of part of a question like this.
yeah,
Um,
okay,
so I would just be really good at attack, really good at providing information, and then really good at one other one. And we can talk about
yeah,
behavioral economics in a second as well. In terms of regulation, I would never do that as a main policy. There's not enough to write about.
yeah,
But if you are going down the regulation route, what you can do is the same exact thing you did for providing information. You can talk about the market failure
yeah,
and say that we want to get from Q1 to QS. The only guaranteed way to do that is by drawing a fat line over here or at zero. Okay. And just saying that that's it. There's no more sales apart from QS, or just ban it completely. And then we won't be over consuming anymore.
uh, what did you mean by the red lines? Like, I don't get what that
Oh,
was.
you don't have to draw a line, but you can basically draw the same diagram and say that the government can wants to get to QS, and there are different ways to do it, but the only guaranteed way that would work is by regulation, meaning
Yeah,
that shops would either have a limit of how much they can sell, which you add up and matches up to QS, but that would be
yeah,
really almost impossible to implement because how would you know how many to allocate to Sainsbury's and to Tesco and to different shops. And then the other option is just to completely regulate it to zero.
yeah,
But then QS is here. QS is not at zero. So that's one evaluation. And also, you again, you're controlling people's behavior, which is not necessarily right.
yeah.
But I didn't sound, as I didn't sound so confident, I just wouldn't pick regulation as a paragraph by itself. I just touch on it if I need to.
Okay, yeah,
Um, a minimum price is a really easy one. Suppose you're stuck and you don't know what to do. A minimum price is one of the easiest diagrams in economics. You just do your supply and demand and you just do minimum price up here. The evaluation is that it causes this much excess supply. Is that okay?
evaluation. What was the evaluation?
Excess supply. Let me show you the diagram properly because I just rushed it completely. 1 second. That's your minimum price diagram. The good thing is that it's another way of getting Q1 to fall to Q2. but the evaluation is that demand could be in one of them is that there's an excess supply
Yeah.
Q2 to Q1, so firms might be unhappy or may go out of business. And another evaluation is just the fact that it could be inelastic. Demand could be inelastic, just like we talked about with a tax. So
Yeah.
you could actually redraw the diagram again at inelastic, and you'll see that suppose it was inelastic, price would go up a lot and quantity wouldn't fall. Where would all the money go then?
Sorry, what was the question?
Where would all the money go if it's inelastic?
Uh, it would, if it was an elastic, it would just be wasted. I mean, it would just there's no effect from the minimum price, so there nothing would happen.
It will go
Like it
to
would
firms actually. It will go to firms. They'll make so much profit.
from the farms that sell the goods, the
Yeah.
Demerit.
Imagine if I do demand like that,
Yeah,
if I did supply like this,
yeah,
the minimum price. I'm gonna,
yeah,
sorry, it's messy. I'm going from here
yeah,
to here, which is crazy. I'm only getting quantity to drop a tiny bit, and I'm
yeah.
getting price to go all the way up to here.
Oh, okay.
So it's a really bad policy because firms are going to make so much profit, and that's not good for anyone's incentives because
Yeah,
you're rewarding bad behavior. You're rewarding firms who sell demerit goods, and that's going to incentivize them to maybe even sell more. Whereas at least with a tax, okay, it's inelastic, but at least you get that tax revenue out of it, which the government can redistribute in positive ways.
yeah.
But if you had this with a minimum price, then the firms are making all that profit, which is very, very a silly idea. But as much of a silly idea as it is, you can still make a paragraph out of it if you're stuck. It's a really easy paragraph to write about.
Okay. Would they ever ask you like to focus on like evaluate how effective minimum pricing is like would they ever
Um,
ask that?
it's I've never seen a 25 marker just purely on like something like a minimum price, but um part of it is relevant for labor markets where they could ask about minimum wages. So we can go
Yeah,
over that separately, but I wouldn't expect something like a minimum price is way more likely in a 15 marker, and it would just say explain the impact of setting a minimum price on vapes.
yeah. Okay.
But I don't think that would come up anyway because, like I said, minimum price is a silly idea because firms make profit and there's excess supply. But it could because it's part of the spec.
Okay. Yeah.
The best bets are focusing very, very, very detailed on indirect tax, behavioral economics, and provision of information.
Okay. So if I were to do two big paragraphs on indirect tax and provision of information, would I be calm? Would it be good?
Yeah, I reckon that's exactly what I would do myself as well.
Okay.
And I would touch on behavioral economics in either of the paragraphs and just say that um, either you could do it in your evaluation of indirect tax and say that uh, these traditional methods distort markets. So there are new methods such as behavioral economics, which can be more beneficial. Or you could
Yeah.
talk about information and just say the idea of provision of information, there's another similar alternative called behavioral economics, and it's when um, it's like the modern ways that people who study economics and psychology have come up with in order to manipulate people's choices for the better.
Yeah. So it's a new modern kind of
Yeah,
policy.
make sure you just explain that it's a modern and it's not a not a traditional government intervention, and say that the benefit is that it um, does not distort markets in any way. So there is very
Yeah.
low risk of government failure. The only risk is maybe that government that you might lose votes if they're seen as annoying. But that we don't really care about that as much in economics. It's not politics or anything. So there's low risk of like government failure.
Yeah.
Um, and it means that people can still buy the thing if they want to, but it just reduces that certain amount of people who are just buying stuff without thinking really.
Okay.
Like something so simple as bringing salad to the front of the restaurant. And that's the last point I was gonna, sorry, salad to the front of the shop and a sweets at the back of the shop.
Yeah.
And the last thing
Is
I was going to
that
say is just on your own research, like 4 or 5 or 3 examples of behavioral economic policies, such as salad at the front, lottery tickets behind the shelf, asking ID for annoying things just to make sure that people have a second chance to think about it, and related to the fact that some weaknesses about what's the good word? Weaknesses of human behavior are that they take mental shortcuts too many times. So they'll just see something at the front and they'll just buy it, or they get attracted to like pleasant looking things. Like vapes are colorful, right?
Yeah.
So one policy could be make all vapes like white or something silly like that, or boxes like you know how they make cigarettes with all those like disgusting things on the box.
Yeah.
To do the same,
Yeah. Yeah.
like all this
Could
kind of
you, with the regards to the weaknesses human, would that come under like rational lack of rationality or like irrationality of
100%. That's exactly what I was trying to say when I couldn't think of the word.
okay.
Basically, the reason I'm asking you to go through all of this is say the paragraph is purely on behavior. Say you have to do, you know how we said the question could say any policy or it could say compare behavioral economics and something else. If you want to write a good paragraph about behavioral economics, you can't just say put the vapes at the front, put the vapes at the back, this, that. You have to explain why it's a great policy. The reasons is that one, it doesn't distort markets, low risk of government failure. And the third thing is that it really it's thoughtful and it's gone through why humans are irrational. And it's there to actually benefit humans rather than to impact them negatively.
Yeah.
We as humans ourselves would admit that sometimes we're irrational. So if somebody could do something that makes us think more rationally or makes us behave more rationally, then we're all for that.
Yeah.
And obviously, the evaluation is going to go back to what you said about we don't want the governments to be too controlling in terms of our choices. And um, some people are definitely going to buy the thing anyway. They've thought about it, they've made their mind up. So why are you just making it annoying for them?
Yeah.
And lastly, there is still costs like administrative costs. They would have to, for example, the government can't just tell Sainsbury's where to put their vapes, or they can't just call up vape companies and say to make the put vaping kills on the packages.
Yeah.
There's a lot of logistics behind it, and one of the always in your evaluation, always talk about government failure. Always talk about an example of government failure. So say the example of government failure might be unintended consequences with the tax diagram. This is unintended because the intended consequence was to go from Q1 to Q2, but the unintended consequence was only going from Q1 to Q2, like this much.
Yeah.
Or in behavioral economics provision, you could talk about the government failure being excessive administrative costs.
Okay. Yeah.
And whilst revising all this, we've covered all the stuff that could come up in the 15 marker as well. The question could be explain why behavioral economics is useful, or the question could be explain two behavioral economic methods, or the question could be explain a tax, explain a minimum price, any of these kind of things.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. One last thing for the, for the minimum price, what was the like? I mean, I know the valuation. What was the like the main points about it?
On the good thing is that in theory, if you just look at the minimum price diagram, Q1 has fallen to Q2 and the market failure was an overconsumption. So now Q has fallen, so there's no more overconsumption anymore. So successful job done. The evaluation is that, first of all, it's just very unlikely because the demand curve, in theory, which we learned in the textbook, is not accurately reflecting the fact that vapes are inelastic. So we would not go here, we would instead go here. So again,
Okay.
same thing about taxes. Q is not really falling if it's inelastic. The second thing, the A-star student is going to compare if you're doing this and a tax. We said a tax is bad because it's inelastic, but this is even worse. It's even more bad because not only is quantity not falling, there's no government tax revenue from it, and firms are making profit. If firms are making profit and being rewarded for selling something bad, then this is just going to further incentivize negative behavior. Because remember, the market mechanism incentivize, signaling, allocate. And
Uh,
sorry,
so what was that last part you said?
I was just saying how markets, the market mechanism. I want to go over that separately, so don't stress about that part.
For the firms rewarded for selling, how is that shown on the diagram? Like what shows that? They rewarded like they get more profits.
So total revenue equals price times quantity. You could say that, and you could say that total revenue is increasing. Or
Like, is that yeah? How yeah? Is on the diagram? Is it how is it shown?
you can't see it in this diagram, but if you did the same diagram as inelastic, so
Yeah,
total revenue is used to be all of this.
yeah,
The new total revenue would be all of this. So if you were, and price is going up, so there's more profit per unit, right?
yeah.
It
Is
basically
that is
means some firms have to shut down. So these firms have to shut down, or they have excess supply because they don't have enough customers. Some people have stopped buying it because price went up.
do they
But
have excess supply?
yeah, yeah, because they price has gone up. So if you're selling vapes as £200, you want to sell it, but people don't want to buy it from you, right? So you
Yeah.
might have to cut down. But the firms that do remain, they're going to make more profit. So it's kind of weird as well. This isn't like very technical. It's not something you learn in the book, but it's just you can touch on it. Um, I would just touch on the fact that price has gone up and it's going to mean that some firms are making more profit. Just keep it very simple. Don't overcomplicate it. I think I just overcomplicated it right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about what I just said. Just say that because price has gone up, it means that firms would make more profit just purely because price has gone more profit per unit at least. Then that's definite. We don't know about the quantity.
Then firms would make more profit per unit.
Yeah, per unit sold, right? And for example, if you have Sainsbury's, Sainsbury's sell a million different things. So if they're making more profit for a vape, then like surely that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So you
The
just
vape king.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, I don't mind spending an extra 10 minutes because I want to go over one more thing with you. Is
Yeah.
that
Okay. Yeah,
cool?
that's fine.
I just want to finish market failure, and I just explained earlier that there are two types of questions. One is that um the question could be evaluate the best policies. Sorry, where's the question again? It was, is a tax the most effective policy? Remember I said the other type of question is something like, should governments intervene?
Yeah.
So for example, in the sand question, they did that. The question said, assess the view that scarcity of sand is best solved by market forces rather than government intervention.
Yeah.
Um, Now, this question is weird because I mean, sorry, like we need the extract to do it. But just suppose the question was, I read the extract and I believe it was a negative externalities question.
Yeah.
So assuming we could apply it to the same thing, we could say the question could be, should the problem of vaping be best solved through market forces or should the government intervene? This is different. You cannot talk about all three or four policies. That would be wrong. The question is clearly saying you need one side on saying, yes, the government should intervene, and another side saying, no, leave it to the market forces. This is a mistake I made when I was in year 12 and 13 until I realized you have to read the question carefully and make sure it doesn't say this version.
Yeah.
Okay. In this case, do you know what your main paragraphs would be?
Uh, I
Like
mean,
your main arguments for yes and no would be.
yeah. So, would you talk about like you can put that like money into other things like subsidizing other or using that tax or the government spending could be go towards other things as why it shouldn't you oh no that's the wrong side it should
No,
intervene
that's fine. That's
because
fine. Think about it. Take your time. Take your time. Take a break for a minute or two. Think about it because it's not an easy question. Um, Basically, let's assume the question said, should the government intervene to solve the market failure with petrol and diesel cars causing emissions? Or let's say the question says something like, cars cause emissions. Should the government intervene in this market, or should it be left to market forces?
yeah
The question is not about the different forms of intervention. The question is overall about intervening or not intervening. So the way I would do this, my intro would be almost identical and just identify that cars might be a demerit good, or fuel cars might be a demerit good. And then from there we could talk about how this could be a market failure because there could be an overconsumption. And in order to decide if government should intervene, we want to know if government intervention would improve the situation or solve the market failure or not. So I basically have 4 paragraphs, and you could either combine them and do 2 big ones, or you could do 4 of them for this kind of question, and I'll show you what my 4 are. So
Okay.
one of them would be the government has to intervene because so far we have left the situation to the free market. So has the government ever intervened in the car market until now?
Yeah, maybe no, probably not.
Not really, not really. Maybe a tax. Let's just pretend they haven't, okay?
Yeah,
So we have left the situation to the free market, and what has this caused? It has caused a overconsumption.
yeah,
Yeah. Because nobody in the free market cared one bit about the taxpayer, about the people who get asthma, or about the global warming, or whatever it is.
yeah,
You could talk about some of those examples, or you could
yeah.
talk about something simple like congestion and traffic, and you can basically explain that you could draw the negative externality in consumption diagram.
The same diagram we did earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And we can say that we are at Q1, but we want to be at Q star. So that itself is a reason that the free market is not working. The government should intervene because the government know how to move from Q1 to Q star, right? Does that make
Yeah,
sense? So
yeah,
just
that makes
this
sense.
is what's the M. This one is the free market outcome. We talk about this again.
Yeah,
We want to be here. So why would the government not intervene? That doesn't make sense. So that's your argument, basically.
yeah,
Okay. The second argument is that, or a set, and then the second paragraph you can say, so this is like one. Okay, and then number 2 would be that one example of a government intervention fixing this is a tax. Like if you want to do that, you don't have to do this. You could pick whichever one you want. Or you could talk
okay.
about consumer information or a bit of both. But you could don't say that the government should put a tax on it. Don't say that. Say that one example is a tax, and
Yeah,
this is an example that proves that government intervention would better the situation. So this is an example of how government intervention would solve or improve the market failure. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Okay. And then on the other hand, obviously you can evaluate this and talk about some issues with your chosen government intervention. And
yeah.
one you could talk about how actually I'm going to come to this and then come back to evaluation. There are 2 reasons to leave to market forces. One is government failure. That's an easy one. So suppose you talked about an indirect tax or provision of
Yeah.
here you would talk about government failure of that thing. Or you could just talk about tax quickly, briefly explain that cars are inelastic because they're a necessity and there are not many good substitutes. So therefore intervening would make no difference, blah, 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 and just talk about how that's a government failure, how it's unintended consequences and excessive costs.
What? So that comes under the number 2 point.
That comes under the no, leave it to the market forces. Government intervention is a waste of time.
Oh, okay. Cause yeah, okay, I get that. Yeah,
Yeah. And you could, after I finish, I'll show you how you can structure it differently. And then point 2 would be this is the hardest. This is the bit you were going to ask me about earlier. The market mechanism.
Yeah.
This powerful thing or very cool thing. Adam Smith's invisible hand.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just the idea that the market mechanism has these three traits: ration, incentive, signal.
Yeah.
What this basically means, especially focusing on incentive, for example, if there is overconsumption, let's say there's high demand for something and price is high,
Yeah.
that's going to incentivize innovation and people to join the market. And uh, basically, in long story short, it's going to incentivize innovation.
Yeah.
And we've seen already, actually, for take cigarettes, for example, when we didn't intervene in the market, nothing happened. If we did, people would literally be dying every day of smoking.
Yeah.
Look at the car market and look at how over time in the last 4 or 5 years, we've actually seen electric cars. That's just the beauty of people and their creativity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or another example is books and newspapers causing the cutting down of trees. That was a market failure, wasn't it? Because it's cutting down trees, so negative externality in production.
Yeah.
But the government didn't have to tax books or regulate books, but instead, people came up with the Kindle. Someone made a Kindle, or someone made ebooks or audiobooks.
Yeah.
Did the government ever have to intervene to do this? No, they didn't.
So it promotes innovation through the incentive function of market
Yeah.
mechanism.
And it's called creative innovation or creative disruption. You can
So that keyword that I should include?
You don't have to, no. Just include basically one tip in general for your essays is just include what you're 100% confident with. If you have 15 minutes to go on Google or YouTube and read about it and you're sure about it, then include it. If not, then leave it. If not, none of these things are very, very important that you have to include them.
Yeah.
Never
For the
waffle in an
create.
essay, by the way. Never say something you're not sure about. Just be sure on everything and just say less if you have to.
Okay. Yeah. For the creative disruption, is that the same thing as creative destruction?
Uh, y- yeah, oh, sorry, that's what I meant. It's the same thing. There's like
Oh,
different,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically, it's kind of you can evaluate some of these things in different ways. Uh, one of the evaluations is that you have a massive time lag, or not a time lag even. You just have to be patient. Market
Yeah.
forces are not instant. You could say the same about government intervention. So, but we talked about how vaping is being banned from next year, not this year, and how cigarettes are banned from 2020, whatever I can't remember now. Sorry, 2010, people who are 14. So in 4 years' time.
Yeah.
So whereas like the Kindle, imagine how many years of people reading books, how long did we have to wait for audiobooks to become a thing? So like yeah, all of these things can be part of your evaluation.
The Adam Smith's invisible hand thing. Do
Yeah.
I have to talk about
No, it's the same thing as it's just basically the market mechanism includes these things. And Adam Smith
that?
was one of the first economists to kind of go down this route that our markets are actually quite cool and they do all these things automatically. And Adam
Yeah.
Smith was the first guy that said, like, don't touch markets. They're very good. They'll handle it all by themselves.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
could just say that Adam Smith's invisible hand was like the starting point of this. And I think I don't even know myself. I believe maybe Hayek or someone was the guy who went further on this point. But I honestly have no idea, so I wouldn't write about it.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, Now you could structure this in two different ways. You could either do a massive paragraph and another massive paragraph, or you could do yes, no, or you could use maybe like government failure, you cannot do as a separate paragraph. Instead, you could do as evaluation of this. That I'll leave it completely up to you. You think about it and do it yourself how you want.
Yeah. For the government failure point, would
Yeah.
I talk about how like the government might not have could like they don't have perfect information, so they might like tax like the wrong amount or like not the right
Yeah.
amount, and that could
100%, 100%. And you can refer to the example we used before about
yeah
how we're taxing something that's inelastic. That's not a good idea because look what happens.
yeah
Or we could talk, yeah, exactly. Anything you want. The key thing
Yeah,
with
okay.
finding is to find things that are repeatable. Like I could talk about that in this essay or in the other essay.
Yeah.
The only thing is, I'm probably not going to have time to go over positive X merit goods. So merit goods could be something like laptops or Wi-Fi. That could be a big one. Like it could be a question saying, should everybody have access to Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
So just apply these in terms of subsidies and minimum prices and state provision and stuff like that.
Okay.
I do want to go over state provision all the time with you, so I will do that. But in terms of subsidies, go over that yourself.
Yeah. Uh, you know what we did today? Is that it's pretty much all of market failure? It's covered.
If you cover subsidies, maximum prices, anything to do with merit goods and state provision, then that's all of market failure done.
Okay. So for next lesson, would you say like we should go through merit goods or should we just go to